Hello YouTube world, this is James Johnson and I am in a game known as Shroud of the Avatar. Now I'm standing inside of a player village. This specific player village is Virtual Oasis. And you can see my character here. You can see that I've got all these glowy and funky things on me. That's because I'm wearing the Shroud of the Avatar. That's the white thing. So I've completed most of the main quest line, if you will, and I have a fair amount of hours within the game of Shroud of the Avatar. Now, I wanted to hop on here and to basically do a review video. Basically share my concerns, my points of view about the game, and what I honestly feel about Shroud of the Avatar. So this is going to be a review, basically, of the game. Now, please understand, I'm an old school gamer. I'm not here to do a let's play, I'm not here to do an in-depth analysis. When I say review, I'm basically going to tell you how I feel about the game. Is the game fun? Do I like the game? These things are things I expect to see in a review, not an in-depth explanation of how the game is played. If you want that type of video, I will recommend Elaina Strongbow. He does an amazing job on doing content inside of this game. Go watch his videos and learn how to play Shroud of the Avatar if that's what the type of content that you're wanting to watch right now. Otherwise, if you want to hear an old cranky gamer talking about how he feels about this specific title and what Richard Garriott and Starlong did right and what they did wrong, then you're at the right place. So, first off, Shroud in the Avatar is not a bad game. I put a considerable amount of time in it, but there are some fatal and horrible flaws. Okay. Let's just take one topic at a time, shall we? So Shroud of the Avatar isn't a graphically amazing game, but it's nice to look at. So there's nothing wrong to look at here. Everything looks pretty nice in the game. That looks like a dock. The water looks like water. Is it perfect water? Is it perfect dock? Are those buildings perfectly rendered? No. They're, but do they need to be? Like there's a wyvern flying off in the distance over there. I don't believe, especially in an MMORPG circumstance, that we need to put all of what we do within the side of the game into graphics. I think that's a horrible thing because it limits what you can do with the game. It limits the meat and potatoes. It limits the content. So I think Shroud of the Avatar took a very nice graphical point that we're able to do in technology right now, which allows them to put more meat and potatoes into the game. That's what most MMORPG designers should be doing. They should not be making the cutting edge visual technology. They should be putting in the cutting edge meat and potatoes, because most MMORPGs for the past 12 years have been completely and utterly and horribly lacking in meat and potatoes of the gameplay. I'm not going to devote hours upon hours of my day playing an MMORPG if there isn't things to do with hours upon hours of my day. Sorry. Okay, so with that being said, I think graphically there's nothing wrong with Shroud of the Avatar. It is a pleasing to look at game. But then, I'm an old gamer, so what's pleasing for me to look at might not be pleasing for you. And if you're a younger gamer, well, sorry. I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. So, next topic. We've got the graphics out of the way, shall we? I want to give you some background about me. So, I'm going to tell you about some games, like the Elder Scrolls series. The holy grail of RPG, if you will. Daggerfall, I remember when Daggerfall came out. Daggerfall was this gigantic map the size of Great Britain. I mean, it was amazing. The stuff you could do in Daggerfall, you could make your own spells. No, I don't mean, you know, give it a prefix and a suffix. No, I mean literally make the entirety of the spell, everything to do with it. That is just one of so many things that Daggerfall had in it. So many nuts and bolts, so many nuances, so much complexity. And I'm going to tell you, complexity is a good thing in a game. Games need complexity. The Elder Scrolls franchise, well, it's been an amazing franchise, has done nothing but go downhill with each iteration. Each iteration gets dumbed down. The game becomes more streamlined. It graphically becomes better and better, and the maps shrink and shrink, and the content slowly withers and fades. Does that make Skyrim a bad game? No. Skyrim was an amazing game. I put many hours into Skyrim. I put many more hours into Oblivion, and I put many more hours into Morrowind, and even far more hours into Daggerfall. But I have a trend there. Each iteration of Elder Scrolls that comes out, I put less hours into their game. And it's completely and utterly having to do with the fact that they're dumbing down their games. Why did I tell you that story? Because I wanted you to know what kind of gamer I am. Now, the next story I'm going to tell you is about sandboxes versus theme parks. I grew up playing Ultima Online. Part of the reason I played this game, right? Ultima Online was one of the very first MMOs, RPGs in history, and it was created by Richard Garriott way back in 1996-97, and I was there from the get-go. I loved Ultima Online. It was my baby. It was the first game, if you will, and I hated EverQuest. I remember my friends wanted me, I had some friends that wanted me to try EverQuest. They gave me a free CD. I downloaded it, tried it, and that's maybe the first time I've ever taken an actual CD of a game and tossed it out of my window. That's how much I disliked the game. It was utter and total crap compared to Ultima Online. And so this story shows you how much more I strive and like a sandbox-oriented MMORPG over a theme park-oriented MMORPG. Star Wars Galaxies had maybe the best crafting system I've ever seen in a video game. Still to date. Ultima Online was the best MMORPG ever. Still to date. World of Warcraft was a very good game. It was very impressive. I thought it was well done. I played a lot of World of Warcraft. Sadly, I put a couple of years into World of Warcraft. But it was a theme park. Though it was a hybrid. It was kind of a hybridized theme park. It had a lot of sandbox-esque aspects to it, which I feel Shroud of the Avatar is kind of more hybridized than it is theme park as well. It's kind of like World of Warcraft in that way, in that both of them allow your character to go pretty much wherever your character wants to go. You're just not going to have a very good outcome when you go to these areas that you shouldn't necessarily go. And so, WoW is not on Rails. It never, even though the quest lines were on Rails, it wasn't. You could travel your character wherever you wanted, providing you had all the DLCs. Shroud of the Avatar is much that way. So I don't get the old school sandbox vibe off of Shroud of the Avatar, and that's most definitely the case. So Shroud of the Avatar has quest lines. It's very story oriented. It's very much Ultima single player oriented. And this is where Shroud of the Avatar really starts to, well, for some of us, go downhill. Shroud of the Avatar is a pretty good game. It's one of the better MMORPGs that's come out in a long time, but it's got some fatal and terrible flaws. And one of the first flaws is it doesn't have a good sense of identity. What do you mean it doesn't have a good sense of identity? What I mean by that is you have an online mode and an offline mode. You have a single player mode and a multiplayer mode. You have a game that has lore and gameplay mechanics that are tying back to Ultima single player and Ultima Online. But ultimately, this game, when it's all said and done, is at its most core an MMORPG. And since it's at its most core an MMORPG, it should most resemble Ultima Online, but it does not. It resembles Ultima far more than it does Ultima Online, and that is maybe its biggest and most fatal flaw. Now, where the problems really start to meet the road is one of the best mechanics within the game of Shroud of the Avatar is housing. So we're in a player-owned town, and we're seeing houses everywhere, right? These houses were placed there by players. Players live in these places. They've decorated these places. Just gonna try to walk around and give you some lookings at the housing. And so, yes, we see lots of housing. The problem with the housing inside of this game is ultimately that it's paid for with real life money. And that is the cut and dry scenario behind it. Yes, you can get housing in other ways. So there is two types of housing. There's taxed housing, and then there's tax-free housing. Tax-free housing, and then there's also even more to that. So housing is a very complex scam, if you will, and I don't think it was done on purpose to be a scam, but it feels like that to the gamer. It feels like that to the person playing the game. Even if you're willing to look past housing and try to give Shroud of the Avatar a fair shake, the housing, it sits in your craw. you have to buy a parcel of land to put your house on, just like you would in real life. If you want to build a house, you're going to have permission to put the house on somebody else's land, or you're going to have to buy the land. And that's how it works here in the world of Shroud of the Avatar. And so you can get player-owned town deeds. So these are deeds that can only be placed within player-owned towns, and they can come in versions of taxed and untaxed. You can also get place everywhere deeds, which you can put them in player-owned towns. You can put them in the towns that are in the storyline of the game, and that's provided that there's space to put them. Right. So the player-owned towns will more likely be have space, where if you're trying to place down your deed in a storyline town, the space may not be available for you. So there's pros and cons to which types. So I've already had far more of a discussion than I really wanted about housing already, just trying to explain the housing system, which I'm not here to do I'm not here to explain the housing system. So I'm just going to try to break this down into simple mechanics, or not simple mechanics, but just the basic premise of my argument here. The most desirable housing in the game is purchased with real-life money. That has been Shroud of the Avatar's primary monetization of the game. They have put that first and foremost as their model of sustaining the servers, of providing their primary form of income is through monetizing their housing. And that, to me, is a horrible, horrible, horrible mistake. I truly believe that this game would be way better off. It would be much more played at this point, and much more loved, if the housing and the vendors, so vendors are included in this conversation. There's tax vendors and tax-free vendors, and if you want tax-free vendors, you have to spend real-life money. And now, I haven't even put the price tags. I haven't shared the price tags yet. But, you know, maybe some of you out there are saying to yourself, well, that's not so bad. We could just spend a little money. What's $20 for a vendor? Oh, maybe $20 for a vendor wouldn't be such a huge thing if it was $20. No, vendors are in packages that cost, you know, in the neighborhood of $200 to $250. The housing, it starts at like $120 for the cheapest, crappiest house, and goes into the thousands of dollars. So we're talking some really inordinate amount of cash that's being spent on the housing. And when you put price tags like that inside of a game, especially an MMORPG that survives off of numbers, masses of players that come from many different demographics, not just upper class USA, but lower class third world countries. You're even us poor middle class and lower class Americans, we can't afford these prices. It's crazy. So you've already limited your clientele of the game by your monetization method, and you're like, well, just don't get a house. Well, I'm sorry, but one of the main appeals or draws to an Ultima Online type MMORPG is housing, player housing, and the ability to take part in the economy. The economy being a vendor economy. Vendor economies are amazing. It's one of the things I love so much about a different voxel game known as Boundless. It's an MMORPG voxel game that I think is just amazing. One of the best MMORPGs I've played in years. Maybe the best since Ultima Online is a frickin' Minecraft MMORPG, if you will. And that's Boundless. If you haven't tried Boundless, you need to go try it. But Shroud of the Avatar? Shroud of the Avatar could have Boundless or Ultima Online's economy, but it doesn't. Because, well, it does. But it does for an elite group of human beings on the planet that can afford to partake in that economy and can afford these vendors and can afford this housing. And so ultimately, here it is. This is the problem with Shroud of the Avatar. Shroud of the Avatar is an amazing MMORPG that isn't so amazing. The best parts of it are trapped behind an insurmountable paywall. And they've done things to try to relieve the paywall, right? They give away these houses in every month in these like telethon things, and they have in-game raffles you can buy raffle tickets to try to win one of these houses in game, and people do that. The economy is small enough that if you keep buying these raffle tickets, you could, if you play the game long enough, not only win one, but maybe win two. And you could have been one of these players who bought their own house for $1,000 of real-life money, and they ended up getting a couple more houses worth a lot of money that they've got through raffles in-game. And then they turn around and they sell them to other people who are desperate for a house for less than what the game would charge, probably, but still make some cash off of it themselves. And ultimately it propagates. It propagates the whole housing scam of the game. It's great if you're, if you've got the income to play the housing game within Shroud of the Avatar, but ultimately it's not good for the player base. It's what keeps the numbers in Shroud of the Avatar down. And Portalarium, which are the developers, Richard Gary at Starlong and Gang, they take the approach to this to basically being an ostrich and sticking their heads in the sand. They don't want to hear this message. In fact, they've been so adamant about not hearing this message that their community manager, a person by the name of Barrick, is one of the most, well, how do I put this? I've played a lot of games through the years. I've partaken in a lot of forum discussion, and I've never seen a totalitarian state like Shroud of the Avatar, and especially Barrick in particular. He will censor everything and anything on the internet, from the Steam forums to the in-game forums, and he will threaten to ban your in-game account if you post something on the Steam forum, and vice versa. Barrick is he's totalitarian in his stance about there can be nothing bad said about Shroud of the Avatar, which puts a very negative it's a very negative it paints the game in a negative light. And the reason for this is a good game doesn't have anything to hide. It can stand up against its critics. If you are so scared of the criticism that you go to that level of hiding the criticism, then the criticism is founded in reality. The criticism has merit, evidently, or else you would take the criticism you get, you'd smile, you'd rebut it, or you would deal with it. You would live with the criticism. Most games live with their criticism. There are bad things in every game. No game is perfect. But in the Shroud of the Avatar world, this is not a company that deals with criticism. This is a company that hides criticism and bans players, and I think it's another symptom of the failure of what Shroud of the Avatar is. So, with that being said, ultimately, Shroud of the Avatar is a pretty decent MMORPG. It's one of the better MMORPGs to be released in an era of really, really bad MMORPGs. It's been an era of sandbox, or not sandbox, but theme park clones. It's been World of Warcraft rehashed over and over and over again. And while World of Warcraft was an okay game, so many of the games that have come after it and since trying to replicate it are utter and complete crap. The MMORPG genre as a whole is a dying genre, and that genre is dying because we keep getting crap games made. I had a lot of hope for Shroud of the Avatar. I had a huge amount of hope because I thought if anyone could bring back the sandbox, could bring back the Ultima Online feel that I so desperately craved, it would be Richard Garriott, the guy who made Ultima Online. Well, this is sandbox-esque. It's more sandboxy than many MMORPGs that have come out, but it's got a lot of single-player story elements. It's more Ultima than it is Ultima Online. And so, from that regard, this is still not the sandbox that we've been waiting for. This is not the Ultima Online 2.0 that everybody wants. This is a pretty decent MMORPG when you compare it to the other games of the genre that have been released in the past 12 years. But if you compare it to Ultima Online, this game is crap. If you compare it to Star Wars Galaxies, this game is crap. If you compare it to World of Warcraft, which is not a sandbox, this game is crap. RuneScape. Compared to RuneScape, this game is crap. So, sadly, the MMORPG community doesn't know how to make a good MMORPG. I have a lot of hopes for the guys at Ashes. Steven, whatever his name is, who's basically a rich guy who's decided that he's fed up with bad MMORPGs, and so he's spending his own money out of his own wallet to try to get a good game. I salute him. I hope that his dream becomes a reality. I envy him. I wish I had the money to be able to fund my own MMORPG. But I look forward to playing that game and seeing what his perfect MMORPG is, being that he's an older school gamer. And I think the MMORPG genre needs more of that. It needs more of going back to the grassroots. It needs more subscription-based games. Less of this crap item malls and playing for free. MMORPGs are not an environment where we should be playing for free. But anyway, I've rambled on about Shroud of the Avatar. And the main reason I'm doing this review, which is quite a bit after the release, is I read an online article here not too long ago, basically by Richard Garriott, who's still living in a fantasy world where he believes most Ultima Online players have not heard of Shroud of the Avatar, and thus he doesn't have many players because he's got this great game that nobody has heard of it. And the reality of the fact is, he's got a semi-great game that is mixed with broken features that give people a very bad impression. Surrounded by a community, a Portalarium community that is very adverse to negative criticism. But an in-game community, I didn't talk about the in-game community. So the in-game community is one of the shining lights of Shroud of the Avatar. I don't know what it is about this small in-game community, but they're some of the nicest, most wonderful people you'd ever meet. The in-game community, they would give you the shirts off of their back. Everyone in the in-game community is so charitable, so nice. They're giving, they're helpful. The in-game community inside of this game is one of the best in-game communities I've seen in a long, long time. And it's just weird that you have such a good in-game community in a game that has so many issues and so many problems. And I think it's actually a microcosm of the game as a whole. So you have a very specific group that can afford to play this game, and they're upper class, first world country people who have disposable income. And I don't want to say that upper class individuals on a whole are good charitable people, but I think that they are. I think most upper class people who have extra money are more likely to be charitable because they have the money to be charitable with. And so they're more likely to be charitable people. And thus you see that inside of this community. You see the charity firsthand because that's how they are in real life, and it's being displayed in the game. And so I think these people are awesome. You've got an amazing community within Shroud of the Avatar, but Portalarium is very adverse to negative criticism, and they need to do something about their housing model. The housing should not be trapped behind hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. Their vendors should not be trapped behind hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And the game needs to be more of an MMORPG and less of an Ultima single-player experience. It needs to be focused around the MMORPG aspect of the game and not the offline aspect of the game. Right now, they need to create an identity for this game, not the lack of identity that it currently has. But on a whole, this is not a bad MMORPG. As I've said several times, this is one of the better ones that's released in quite a while, but that doesn't make it good. So when you compare it to its competition, to the other crap in the genre of the MMORPG genre, then it being a shining light, well, it's shiny turd. So most MMORPGs are complete, terrible, unshiny turds, and this one is a shiny turd. And with that being said, that's my review of Shroud of the Avatar. You know, if you're thinking about trying it, give it a try. The only way that you're going to know if it's for you is by actually playing it. There's a lot of good systems in here. It's worth giving a try if you're curious about it. However, if you're a person that just can't deal with shady monetary practices, like charging hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for houses in a game, then you probably want to stay away from this. If you think that Star Citizen is a scam, well, you might want to stay away from this. There's a lot of parallels here. Yes, the monetization, that's the big issue I have with Shroud of the Avatar, and I will always have that issue with it until they clean it up, fix it, do something to it. If they did that, I think the game could progress forward, but it will never progress forward as long as they have these shady monetization housing issues that they currently have. And that is ultimately my review of Shroud of the Avatar, a good game plagued with bad monetization.